one of the cornerstones of mobile heartbeat getting founded is reducing communication errors. If you have a very easy way to communicate that is simple, it is consistent, and it is ubiquitous, your communication errors will drop, and that leads directly to patient safety improvement.
Welcome to Beyond the Blueprint, a podcast designed to empower healthcare professionals, enabling them to improve care delivery through integrated design and technology innovation. My name is Gregg Malkary, and joining me is my co-host Keith Washington. Whether you're redesigning a hospital, launching a new digital initiative, or just curious about the future of healthcare, then you're in the right place. Let's explore together what's possible when we go beyond the blueprint. Our guest speaker today is Remy, CEO of Mobile Heartbeat. He has over 20 years experience in technology and management leadership. Ron has led the development of a unified communications platform that integrates EHRs, nurse call systems, and other key technologies. Ron, welcome to our series. Could you share a little bit more about your background?
Sure. Mobile Heartbeat's been my home for the last 12 years. Before that, I was in a variety of tech-centered businesses, both startups and late stage. And for the older crowd watching today, I'm an early employee of Sun Microsystems. So I go back to kind of the earliest days of workstation and Unix computing back in the 80s. Educationally, I'm trained as an engineer and a computer scientist, and then went on and got an MBA, but let's not let that get in the way of real technology.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Keith, do you have any opening remarks for today?
Yeah, Greg, thanks. So just a couple more details about Beyond the Blueprint. So we're looking to bring together thought leaders to explore how innovative design can really help manage complexity and enhance patient care. And we hope this platform can offer some insights into helping leaders navigate change, align care teams, particularly from a nursing perspective. So I think we want to give nurses a chance to focus more on patient-centered care through design thinking. And I'm looking forward today having a conversation about communications, how important that is to have a good design and have a good communications approach.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Now, before we dive into today's discussion, I want to recognize our valued sponsors who've made Beyond the Blueprint possible, Storage Systems and Simplify Medical. With their support, we're able to bring you insightful conversations around healthcare design and innovation. If you enjoyed today's show, I encourage you to subscribe so you never miss a future episode. With that, why don't we get started? Ron, during our recent conversations offline, you shared a new ROI model for clinical communication solutions that's getting serious attention from healthcare leaders. You talked about two different ROI models, including a bottoms-up and a tops-down approach. Can you explain the difference between these two models and what the benefits of each are?
Sure. The challenge in a communications environment with a unified communications platform has always been, hey, what's my ROI? If I spend money on this, what is my return on investment? And the traditional ROI calculation is what I refer to as a bottoms-up calculation. Is you're going to buy a new piece of equipment, so you're going to calculate the efficiency of that new piece of equipment. What's the cost you're going to save, or what's the revenue you're going to generate? And ROI is return on investment. So your investment is the cost, and your return is the benefit of some sort, either revenue or time savings or quality improvement. And that's great for a point solution. But what do you do when you have to calculate, or you really get comfortable with the ROI on communication platform? It's a lot more difficult. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. Let's go back in time, 85, 90 years, and you're a healthcare system, and you decide to put phones in your healthcare system, good old fashioned rotary dial phones, and you put them in your facility. And I don't think anybody sat down and said, gee, what's the ROI on phones across my facility? And the reason is those phones get utilized in so many different instances, in so many different workflows, in so many different opportunities to both cut cost and increase revenue. Let's take another example in a more modern day setting is I don't think I've ever seen any organization, healthcare or even outside of healthcare, go, what's my ROI in my corporate network, my LAN and my wide area network and my internal Wi-Fi network? And the reason why you can't calculate that is once you put it in place, it's ubiquitous. It's used in so many different use cases that you'd be spending weeks, months calculating the return on every single one of those use cases. So that same methodology from the top down needs to be done to organize your ROI for clinical communications. And I'll give you one real good data point on that is our largest user at Mobile Heartbeat has 200,000 monthly users. They range from transporters to nurses. Those users are having activity use cases on a minute, hourly, daily basis that is so broad, so varied, that to calculate the ROI from the bottom up on each use case, you'd be doing math for ages to get that done. So you got to take it different.
Right now, how are your healthcare clients responding to your top-down ROI model? And
Well,
which specific metrics or outcomes do you highlight to address their expectations or concerns?
Sure. Okay. So let's do a little bit of ROI, kind of modeling together here. So you've got two variables, two levers to pull in an ROI model for healthcare communications. The first is the number of users, the breadth of your organization. And we really focus on that at Mobile Heartbeat of getting as many users as possible on your communications network. And this dates back to the 80s with a concept called Metcalfe's Law. It's an idea that Bob Metcalfe brought into play when the first networks were being deployed. And Metcalfe's Law states that the value of your network, the return on your network, is equal to the square of the number of nodes on the network. Example of that is the fax network. For those of you that remember fax machines, you have two fax machines on a network. Your value is 2 squared, value of 4. Now you put 10 fax machines that can communicate with one another. Your value is 10 squared or 100. So you see that every node you have, you're exponentially increasing the value of your network. All right. So take that into our world is that you've got, that lever to pull to increase the value, your return on investment is the number of nodes. In our world, nodes are users, smartphone users, desktop users. So that's one lever. The second lever is the impact that you have on each of those users, all the different workflows. And I'll give you an example, if you want me to walk through this, of how we figure out what the impact, really minimally is for a broad communication network in healthcare.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd love to hear it.
All right. So let's take a really simple example. And since you wanted to focus on nurses, let's use a nursing example. So we put pedometers on med-surg nurses pre and post installation of our software, our Mobile Heartbeat software with smartphones. We then took the difference between how much they walk pre and post, measured that for a 12-hour shift. The average savings per nurse was 1.2 miles. Now let's multiply that out by the average walking speed, 3 miles per hour of a med-surg nurse. And in a 12-hour shift, just walking alone, we were saving 22 minutes of time of a med-surg nurse, right? 12-hour shift is 720 minutes. So we're saving them at least 22 minutes of time. That's over 3% of their day walking around. So let's make it really, really, really simple. Instead of using 3% as a number, let's just use 1% as a number. Let's be super conservative. That's all we save for all of our users in theory in a 12-hour shift. If you take a 1% savings across, let's say our biggest customers, 200,000 users, that impact is enormous. So your second lever to pull is, as we say to clients, let's just assume all we're impacting your organization is 1%. How can we get that to 2%? How can we get that to 3%? And what you see is your impact is incredibly large.
Are you getting any pushback from organizations, the powers that be, on the use of this top-down approach? Makes total sense. And how are they reacting to that? Because it is disruptive on how a lot of IT professionals or leadership is looking at the problem.
Sure. Well, the first thing is the CFO says, does that mean I can eliminate positions? Does that mean I can eliminate jobs and eliminate FTEs? And the answer to that is probably not, because what you're doing with that impact is you're not eliminating positions, you're repurposing that time to more valuable activities. You're repurposing that time to reduce your overtime costs, for one. You're repurposing that time savings to spend more time with patients, increasing the quality of care, increasing your HCAHPS scores. Or you're repurposing that time for these very, very high trained clinicians to be doing more valuable work, more higher revenue producing work. So the easiest way to measure this, but I wouldn't recommend it, is you've got your communication system installed, their workflows have been modified because now they're using it to save time. Set it off for a week and see what happens. See how your hospital costs start to skyrocket. And think of it back in the 1940s, you've deployed all your phones across your facility. Shut your phones off for a week and see what happens. The impact is immediate, and it's broader and more incisive than you might think.
How conservative is the 1%, or even you just referred to 2 or 3%? Is that a fairly conservative estimate?
Well, I gave you the example of just the nurses walking around the facility, the impact that we have. And that's just walking around the facility. That has nothing to do with anything that is truly communication related, of saving time around a patient issue. It's just not having to spend time finding someone by walking around. That is 22 minutes a day for a single nurse. Multiply that across your enterprise and it gets broad, it gets large. So we try not to be too aggressive about our impact. We use something really, really conservative, just 1%. And we call it the 1% impact. And people, they scratch their heads until they walk through the numbers with us and they go, you're having a bigger impact than 1%, but let's just use that to calculate what your ROI is. And it's substantial.
Oh, interesting. I like that idea of creating a baseline though, right? Turn your system off and let you create a baseline, and it gives you a great comparison point. And I could totally see where the CFO would buy into your numbers. So hats off to you. As we start to look at the future of clinical communication and collaboration solutions, how do you see the ROI models evolving to better reflect the true value of these solutions? Because I'm not hearing of a lot of other vendors that are promoting this type of ROI model.
Yeah, we're taking a I guess a relatively unique approach of this, and we're well suited for taking that approach, because Mobile Heartbeat is always focused on Metcalfe's law, on getting as many people in your organization connected, networked together to communicate as possible. We price our product to encourage as many users as possible. Early on, we learned that we tried to price our product based on the number of users. For each user, you paid a licensing fee. And that worked great for our first client. Then we went to our second one that had a large number of temporary employees that were there one day a week, and they needed a full license to be on the network. So suddenly your costs skyrocketed and it didn't make any sense. So we went to our next client and we decided to price by the number of devices, smartphones or desktops, using the technology, using our software. And what we realized is the CFO of the organization, doing her or his job as they should, started to value engineer the deployment. Well, this department doesn't need devices. Well, this department doesn't need phones. Why would we spend, $500 per device in this department? And what happens there is you're breaking Metcalfe's law. You're not getting the network effect, the squaring of the number of nodes. So what we decided to do, and it's really resonated over the years, is we price based on the number of beds in a facility. It's published. It's you cannot argue over the number of beds. The hospital has to publish it. But what that number really represents, it's a proxy for the size of the organization. So we price based on the number of beds, and then you can use as many licenses as you'd like because you're buying an enterprise site license. And what that encourages is the full deployment of the technology across all departments, across all end users, across all use cases. And that gets your Metcalfe's law number as high as possible, and it should get your return on investment as high as possible as well.
So awesome. Hey, Keith, I know you've thought a lot about these topics. What things would you like to talk to Ron about today?
Yeah, no, I think the impact, I really like that way of measurement. So I guess maybe talk about a couple of other aspects. So maybe, talk about the patient safety impact, Ron, of that impact.
Oh, one of the great things we see is that, you go into a healthcare facility prior to deploying any kind of communication platform, particularly that's smartphone based, and you see an awful lot of time of the clinicians in front of workstations. They are entering notes, they're looking up information. And if you take a look at any of the studies, your nursing staff is spending 48% of their time on in front of some type of screen, doing something that is not directly interacting with the patient. We're going to bring this back to patient safety in a second. Physicians are spending 53% of their time in front of some type of screen. So if we can get them away from those screens and more in touch and in proximity of patients, your patient safety just by proximity alone is going to increase. And the second area of patient safety, and one of the cornerstones of mobile heartbeat getting founded, is reducing communication errors. If you have a very easy way to communicate that is simple, it is consistent, and it is ubiquitous, your communication errors will drop, and that leads directly to patient safety improvement. So those are two impacts on patient safety.
Excellent. And then you'd also mentioned HCAHPS. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of the system on HCAHPS?
Yeah. So again, we did this very early on to prove the value of what we were doing. Is HCAHPS scores are obviously calculated yearly, but most facilities use some other agency like Press Ganey to get weekly HCAHPS-like scores, basically quality scores of their patients. You have a stay in a hospital, you get a quality form, a questionnaire to fill out, and those scores are reflected. And that gives you a sense of how you're doing in HCAHPS. And HCAHPS scores, if you can raise them, they equate to higher reimbursement rates. So we took the HCAHPS scores of our first installed hospital pre-installation of our product, and we had a baseline to use. We installed our software, and there were a couple of questions that we could impact directly. One is the clean and quiet hospital question, trying to take a lot of the background noise out of the hospital. And the second is responsiveness to the patient. And we instantly saw an improvement on those two scores. The first one, clean and quiet, is when your alarms, instead of ringing all over the facility, are going specifically to the end user that needs to see that alarm. You are quieting the hospital instantly. The second quieting impact is your overhead broadcasts on your PA system are reduced because now you can broadcast directly on the phones to the staff. So we quiet the facility immediately. And then the responsiveness is that because we're able to allow the clinician to spend more time with patients, they can be more responsive, or they can respond to a nurse call alert faster because the alert goes directly to them. So we saw almost an immediate impact in HCAHPS score improvements.
Excellent. And then I guess the other impact I'm curious about, maybe talk to, let's say, staff satisfaction, staff retention. How do they feel about having this kind of tool at their disposal?
Well, what they love more than anything is they feel that their organization is giving them state-of-the-art technology that gets them back to being clinicians, gets them back to being medical professionals, and takes them away from being a computer operator.
Right.
And that instantly has an impact. The amount of time they were spending in front of a workstation on wheels or a computer on wheels, a wow or a cow, was substantial. And we're reducing that by putting in their hands with a smartphone the technology that they need.
Outstanding.
Hey, Ron, before we wrap up, on a lighter note, if you could design the perfect clinical communication solution with no limitations, what's the one feature or capability you'd love to include that could be a complete game changer?
Yeah, and we're going down that path, and I'll spend a little time on this. Everyone is familiar now with artificial intelligence. If we didn't mention that in this session, we'd be remiss. But I want you to think about this in two different ways. The first way is that in a clinical setting, and let's take a hospital, there are two use cases of artificial intelligence. The first is the clinical use case. better outcome through clinical uses. The second is the operational use case, is improving the operations of your facility, making the patient experience better, taking cost out of all of your workflows by making things happen faster, or making the information being easier to retrieve by the clinician. We certainly think that there's a big improvement on the clinical side that's coming, but it's a tougher one because you've got to prove its efficacy and its safety. Operationally, there is much more low-hanging fruit to go after. So one of the concepts of mobile heartbeat early on that really has resonated over the years is that our software uses what we call a dynamic care team structure around the patient. We know all the patients in the facility. We know which patients you are assigned to. And we also know the other people assigned to that patient, the team, the care team taking care of that patient. Medicine is in acute care is a team-based exercise. That team and the roster of that team changes dramatically and dynamically throughout the patient's stay. New members get added to the team. Members are subtracted to the team. Members go off shift, go on shift. So knowing who your teammates are at all times, their status, and how to reach them was the core component of our technology. And that's really where it has an impact. We're going to add one more member to every patient's care team, and that is an AI chatbot. So everyone that uses our software knows how to communicate with a team member very easily. Text them, call them, ask them a question. For each of our care teams, that for each patient, there will be a member that's a chatbot. That chatbot will have skills that are AI-based, retrieve information about that patient, place trouble ticket orders in the facility around that patient, or ServiceNow orders to get a piece of equipment replaced in a room. As the chatbot skills get better and better and better, that is now going to increase the effectiveness of the clinicians because they already know how to communicate with their peers using our software. Communicating with an AI large language model in that same paradigm is going to be a natural extension to them. So that, I think, is the game changer. And I would ask you all and your listeners here, to viewers, to think about AI in the healthcare setting, not as artificial intelligence, but as augmented intelligence. We want to augment the clinician's ability to get stuff done. We're not going to artificially replace them. We want to make things happen faster for them, take some of the frustration away from what they have to do, and get better outcomes, better operational outcomes as well, with the addition of large language model technology.
Right. Is this available now, or is this something that's on the roadmap?
It's in tech preview now for us, which means that we can show it and we can show some of the very basic large language model use cases. And we're going to be looking for alpha site customers shortly in 2025. An alpha site customer would be someone familiar with mobile heartbeat already. They understand the concept of the care team, and they're willing to add the chatbot capability to the care team for each of their teams, and see what skills they need that chatbot to do. We'll propose 2 or 3 right up front, get those connected to other data sources in the facility, and we'll see what the impact is. And then we'll keep adding new capabilities to the chatbot over time. So we're not that far away. We're only 3 to 6 months away from it being used in the real world. We call it being used in anger. If somebody uses it in anger, you find out a lot about your technology. It looks cool in PowerPoint, it looks cool when you demo it, but until somebody, uses it in anger, and if they don't throw the phone against the wall because they're so frustrated, it probably is a good piece of technology.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Well, Ron, I'd like to thank you today for sharing your time, your insights and perspectives, and also to our sponsors, Storage Systems and Simplified Medical, made this conversation possible. Ron, do you have any concluding remarks you'd like to make today that might focus on the top-down approach for calculating ROI that we talked about earlier in our discussion?
Well, I'll leave you to it. I'll go back to the Sun Microsystems comment back in the day, is what we see going forward is people looking at this top-down approach to ROI and both increasing the number of users, as I mentioned, via Metcalfe's law, but also taking that 1% up to 2%, up to 3% of impact. And the AI capabilities, the large language model capabilities, will be a big step in that direction. And then lastly, I'm going to take you back to my earliest days with Sun Microsystems, where that company had a large impact in the technology world via the concept of open systems, of breaking down the silos and allowing systems to interact, particularly as new technology came to the forefront. If you could make that data be used across systems, across the organization, the impact started to multiply itself. I am relatively new to healthcare compared to some of the folks I deal with on the technology side, and I've been shocked about the siloed nature of it. It's very difficult for us 10 years ago to actually move data from system to system to interconnect. And I think those silos are beginning to break down. I think the new technology, smartphone technology is a big part of it. That's not relatively new, but in healthcare, it's still getting adopted, is one aspect. Large language models that need various data sources to really operate well is another aspect. So I think over the next 10 years, you start to see the silos starting to disappear, the barriers to sharing data in the enterprise breaking down, and that technology vendors that don't adopt this are going to find themselves in a difficult position, 4 or 5 years down the road if they aren't thinking about who and how they interconnect with going forward.
Well, excellent. Hey, Keith, do you have any final thoughts in today's webinar?
Yeah, just a few. I really want to thank Ron for sharing his expertise and his insights. I think this has really been a great conversation about this ROI perspective and sort of the impact that collaboration can have across a health system, as a practical approach to manage the complexity and really that impact and the importance of solving like 4 or 5 problems at the same time. You're addressing productivity, quality, safety, cost, and then even that overall enterprise confidence of being, playing at the top of your game. So I really appreciate that perspective. And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us on this journey of Beyond the Blueprint. We hope that, this discussion has inspired some of our listeners to look more closely at, their CC&C tools and think about, all the benefits that this can offer. And I also, I look forward, Ron, hope you can come back and give us more examples of your technology and where it's working, particularly that AI piece. I really looking forward to seeing that.
All right, thanks. For our audience members who are not familiar with us, Spyglass Consulting is a product and go-to-market advisory firm focused on disruptive technologies and growth opportunities within the healthcare and life sciences industries. Spyglass proudly serves more than 250 leading entities who are technology companies, management consultancies, healthcare providers, and investment organizations. We've published more than 30 market research reports on a diverse set of informatics-related topics. To access our extensive library of paid research and to gain a deeper insight into how technology is reshaping healthcare, I encourage you to visit our website at www.spyglass-consulting.com. And with that, I think we have a wrap. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Blueprint. Together, we're exploring how thoughtful design can simplify complexity, enhance patient care, and create meaningful change. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review in order to help us continue the conversation. Let's reimagine healthcare together on Beyond the Blueprint.